Hello everyone, Bella Malloy here. Welcome to another midweek mini episode of Seek Travel Ride. This week I am thrilled to be sharing an update from our intrepid traveller Rebecca Gross. Many of you will know that periodically in these midweek episodes we are featuring updates from Rebecca. She left her home in Austria in March this year with the destination of the Pamir Highway, a complete bikepacking beginner, and she's been on the road for a few months now with her lovely partner Harvey. This update is going to cover an enormous part of her journey, her time in Iran and Iraq, and then, drumroll please, what it's actually been like to ride in the Pamirs, her absolute bucket list dream. Later in the episode, I'm also going to be sharing some responses from you, my superfans and listeners who responded to a question on Instagram letting me know what your toughest moment that you've had to deal with on a bike adventure was, so keep an ear out for that. But in the meantime, let's tune in to what Rebecca has to say.
I'll send you this update from Dushanbe, Tajikistan, which means we are one day away to set off to the Pamir Highway. For the last 6 weeks, we have been to Kurdish Iraq and Iran, and I want to share a bit my experience in these two very special countries and why we arrived in the Pamirs way earlier than expected. Kurdish Iraq and Iran are both countries with unbelievable, beautiful landscapes and mountain ranges. Thinking of these two countries, I imagined desert and dry land. But what we found, especially in Kurdish Iraq and Kurdish Iran, were stunning green mountain ranges, waterfalls, big canyons, and crystal clear lakes. The first day in Kurdish Iran reminded us on the mountains at home. We were riding up a high pass, and when we arrived up there, I turned around to enjoy the beautiful view, and I suddenly saw a peak which seemed identical to a well-known peak in our area. And it felt quite surreal. Finding home in a country which couldn't be more different than home. And a country everybody at home warned us. Before visiting Iran, we were a bit nervous. And friends and family, of course, were not a big fan of this plan. But in this journey, we do want to see and experience unique places, not trusting too much in what the media tells you, and find out ourselves. And what we found was not only the beautiful nature, but the great hospitality every traveler talks about. In both countries, we found endless kindness and helpfulness. There was never a day where we wouldn't get invited for a drink, a tea, or even dinner and a place to stay. A great example was our stay in Shiraz. We asked at warm showers for a place to sleep, but the man was not able to host us. But he immediately tried to find a solution. A friend of him, a shop owner, had a beautiful hidden oasis at the back of his shop. It was a 100-year-old house with a courtyard. He handed us the keys and said we should stay as long as we want, constantly apologizing that everything is very old, but he tried to tidy up. These men didn't know us at all, but from the first second on, they trusted us and gave us everything they could offer and always tried to make us feel comfortable. And this is only one moment of great kindness. In between these countless amazing experiences we had. After leaving the Kurdish part of Iran behind, we did find ourselves in the desert. And besides cycling for like 5 days in between, we switched the bikes for the bus. Time in Iran was limited due to the visa, and therefore we knew we couldn't see everything we want if we carry on by bike. But before this small bike break, we were pretty surprised of how well we already adapted to a good routine. Compared to the first weeks, we were so much faster in setting up camp and leave the next morning. I found myself less hungry and never did I struggle with keeping up my energy. What we had to change in our routine were the hours of cycling. In Iran, it was extremely hot, so we had to get up at 4, cycle until 10 or 11, and in the evening for 2 more hours. This was definitely not my favorite routine, but I just can't bear the heat. Iran was by far the most amazing country I have visited, but also probably the most demanding one. What comes with this great hospitality is the lack of privacy. I haven't had time for myself for weeks now. There are constantly people around you. When we just wanted to rest a bit and have a break, we soon became the VIPs of the town, and an endless photo shooting began. This kind of overwhelming interest in tourists we didn't face in Kurdish Iraq. There I had a hard time in leaving back the bad experiences of the first days, where we had problems with dogs and soldiers. So Kurdish Iraq is definitely the country number 1 where Javi does have a complete different experience than I do. He found the great adventure he was looking for. But I was too far out of my comfort zone. But still, I tried to enjoy Kurdish Iraq as good as possible. But I definitely was relieved when we left the country behind. So after Iraq and Iran, we always thought of coming back to Turkey and taking the classic route through Georgia and Kazakhstan. But we knew we wouldn't have enough time to enjoy every bit of the route, and we always hoped to be early in the Pamirs. So we decided to stop making the route more complicated than it is. And since we would always have to take a plane, we decided we could also take a plane directly from Tehran to Dushanbe. Since we stayed in Tehran to climb Mount Damavand, which is a totally different story, we had time to prepare everything for the flight and leave directly to Tajikistan. And that's where we are now. And we were already surprised what we found here. A quiet and neat city where traffic has its rules. No chaos, no big noise, and no dust. Compared to Tehran, this really is holiday for us. Today, we already prepared everything for tomorrow, where our biggest adventure so far will start. The Pamir Highway.
Okay, so this is Rebecca's update all the way to leading up to the Pamirs. We're going to hear what the Pamir Highway has actually been like for Rebecca later in the episode. But firstly, I wanted to give a shout out to some superfans who responded to a question which I posed on Instagram. Now, that question was to tell me what the hardest moment you've ever had during a bike adventure was. And I got a fair few responses, which I'm going to share now. The first one was from Susie Alexander, and she says, "It was the sound of my friend riding behind me crash. Ugh. Oh my goodness, Susie, that fills me with absolute dread in the pits of my stomach, seeing a close friend or hearing a close friend have a crash on their bike would not have been fun to deal with, and I hope that they have recovered and all is well." Sort of similar here on that crash theme is fan of the podcast Sue Chappell, who says, breaking my wrist in Portugal and then having to be repatriated home to Australia. Oh, Sue, I remember when this happened for you last year. Listen, Sue was descending down, and in Portugal there was like a gutter that ran across the street. Her wheel got stuck in that and she went over the bars and broke her wrist really badly. It was not a fun time, I can imagine, Sue. I'm happy to report that you are out there adventuring at the moment, though, in Europe, just off a thrilling trip to Corsica, and now retaking on that section of the Camino Trail, but on foot. Well done. Next up, I have Mad Dog McGlinch, who says, pushing my bike up Vodjak in Croatia. The descent was also the best though, to be fair. Oh, well, Mad Dog McGlinch, I'm glad that you had a great descent to enjoy there. I next have one from All Ride Girl who says, realising with every kilometre on the road that I am pretty much getting addicted to bikepacking. Oh, I actually really love this response. It's sort of like, is this a bad response? Is this a bad thing? A little bikepacking addiction there to fuel your travel wanderlust, no doubt. Two Locos on Wheels, Barbara and Geordie, who I've featured on the podcast before. They're currently in China, and they said, my accident during the trip and all the long recovery time it's taken, plus discovering that my knees will never be 100% afterwards. Oh, another injury theme there, which I think is from you, Barbara. And yeah, healing and realising that our bodies are getting older. It's something I'm not ready for yet either. Sawyer_Jones says, waking up to an Afghan man in my tent watching me sleep 8 hours from the nearest paved road. Oh, wow. Simon, you are the person behind this account here on Instagram, and I have so many questions about this. I cannot imagine how unsettling it would have been to see. And listeners, I'm hoping to catch up with Simon for a full-length podcast interview to come, so keep your ears and eyes peeled for that. Maybe we'll get to the depths of what's happened here. Rob Jevan-Lou says, sticky mud completely blocking both of my tyres. Oh, that sounds absolutely grim. Having to deal with peanut butter mud is never fun at any stage, yet alone when you're on a bike adventure. You're already going slower and then having to stop and hike a bike, push, clear the mud out, find a stick. Yeah, grim. And then you get covered in mud and soil and dirt too. I then have Exploring by Bicycle, podcast superfan and super guest Claire White, who says, battling headwinds for 3 weeks in Australia. Oh, Claire, I remember vicariously living through your journey there in Australia, watching you deal with those crazy headwinds. They did send you a little bit loco from memory, but you did it, and look at where you are now. I then have the Bikepacker AU who says, riding up an 8-kilometre 15% hill at night time too slowly for my dynamo light to work. Oh my goodness. I reached out to the Bikepacker AU about this and found out exactly where this was. This was during the Indie Pack in Australia, and it was in a diversion due to bushfires. And if you're familiar with Australia and the area around Cabramatta, you'll have some thoughts in your mind about exactly how steep and grim this terrain was. Then I have Rob.McLennan, another previous guest of the show, and he says, 800 kilometres of sandy desert gravel in Namibia in 50-degree heat, digging deeper than ever. Glorious days. Rob, my mind is still blown at how you managed to do this. I said that to Rob, actually, listeners, and his response was along the lines of, it's amazing what our bodies can do when we just have no choice but to survive. Now, there you go, listeners. Let me know if you're listening to this. What's the hardest thing you've ever had to deal with on a bike adventure? Send me a DM on Instagram. My account there is @SeekTravelRide. Okay, now let's get back to the rest of Rebecca's update.
Hello from Kyrgyzstan. Yesterday, we crossed the border after a bit more than 2 weeks in Tajikistan. And now I want to give you some insights of how it was for me cycling through the Pamirs. First of all, it is bikepacking heaven. And this is also noticeable on the amount of cyclists we met. After being on the road for 3 months without seeing almost no other cyclists, I really enjoyed some good company. Sharing stories, information, experience, and just laughing for hours with newly made friends was very fulfilling. We stayed in a famous hostel for bikepackers in Dushanbe, and therefore we were immediately part of the community. But this doesn't mean you wouldn't be alone on the road. Every now and then you meet more or less the same people, but you can also easily cycle for days without seeing anyone. On our last day, by coincidence, we met some guys with whom we cycled for some days, and we were able to share all of our stories in Tajikistan again and had a great afternoon with our community again. Cycling in the Pamirs was definitely a dream come true. Everyone has seen photos of this incredible landscape, but seeing it with my own eyes is really special. I have never seen such raw nature. We were out there in the remotest places without seeing anyone for days. Just huge mountains and unbelievable beautiful valleys. This first week was very hard. And I didn't expect this after cycling for already 3 months. We always thought that every steep climb, every difficult gravel route, and every headwind would prepare us for the Pamirs. But soon we realized that nothing, really nothing, can prepare you for that. The road is in such bad condition that often we weren't able to ride for more than 40 kilometers. Some climbs were so steep that we had to push the bikes for a whole afternoon. And on top of that comes the logistic part. You can't find food and water everywhere. And you have to be prepared to be on your own. And the first days were even harder for me, as I struggled with being in a bad phase of my menstrual cycle, as every woman will understand, I think. With having a rest day after the first half of the route, things got better, and I started to feel more comfortable on this adventure. One big highlight of this first part was seeing Afghanistan so close. Just 100 meters away, just across a river, we waved to Afghan people and couldn't believe how close, but also how far away we are from this isolated country. The second part of the route took us away from the crowd, as we were the only ones at this time to go to the infamous Bartang Valley. Known for its difficult river crossings, dangerous landslides, and days without civilization, we decided to go for the adventure. And we were not disappointed. Nature got wilder with every kilometer, and we couldn't believe our eyes. But being away from any help also comes with some difficulties. At the remotest place, our rear racks and a spoke broke. But luckily, we bought a big pack of zip ties, which saved us. Also, we had to be prepared for 2 or 3 days, being completely isolated in terms of food and water. We had some information that there's one super steep pass which brings you to a plateau where you wouldn't find water anymore. So this meant we had to carry all of our water supply for the next days up on this unrideable path. We pushed our bikes all the way with an extra of 19 kilos of water supply only to reach the top and almost falling into a river. We were almost crying, but then also realizing that at least we know now what we are capable of. These days, we had to fight against strong winds, heavy bikes, mechanical issues, and demanding roads. But still, it was so rewarding, and I never regret doing it. Waking up in complete silence, 100 kilometers away from civilization, makes you feel so small in this world and gives you a special feeling of freedom. But also, I was pretty happy to come back to have a hot shower and proper food. At the beginning, we decided to not eat local food and always filter our water, due to hearing horror stories of food poisoning and also seeing it with some fellow cyclists. But Tajik people are so warm-hearted, and on our first day, we already got invited to delicious pilaf, homemade yogurt and jam. How could we resist? But still, we mainly cooked our own food and definitely had some poor diet with instant noodles and rice with tuna and tomato sauce. Luckily, before our remote days, we stayed at a lovely homestay where we got treated with delicious soup, coffee for breakfast, and an invitation to have pilaf cooked for the whole village. But the coffee was definitely my highlight. So food-wise, Tajikistan was probably not the highlight of this trip. But speaking of nature and landscapes, it took my breath away. The Pamirs will remain as a highlight of a lifetime for sure.
Wow, Rebecca. Wow, listeners. What an update we've had. And amazing insights from your time both in Iran, Iraq, through the Kurdistan region there. And then what it's actually been like to do the thing in the Pamirs. Firstly, to the first half of the episode and, your feelings travelling through both Iran and Iraq and what it was like there on the ground. I remember when we very first recorded, Rebecca, how you were saying that one of the things that you think you will be most challenged by is actually going to be finding your own personal space. And I remember you said that that was something that you're aware that you really require. So when you're recounting that amazing, incredible hospitality given to you by the Iranian people there, and then also on the flip side saying how it was one of the most challenging times for you because of the lack of just having that free time to yourself, it took me right back to that as well. But I also equally remember that Iran was one of the countries that you were so excited to visit as well. Yeah, your updates from being in that area, quite incredible. And I also really like the anecdote, how you said what was the most challenging place for you there in Iraq was also one of Harvey's favourite places. And it just goes to show listeners that even when people are travelling as a team of two on the road, that you can have vastly different experiences because of your own perspective and your own personality as well. So I really liked how you shared that insight with me too. And now we get to the Pamirs. Wow. Rebecca, I still remember when you first got in touch with me to let me know about this adventure, how you were tuning into the podcast as inspiration and this is what you were going to be taking on. And so to be able to hear the update of what it was like to actually be somewhere you dreamed about, ticking the item off your bucket list, but also the physicality of being there, it was immense for me. I had a chuckle when you were saying that all along the journey you've been saying that with every challenging road, steep climb, steep descent, that you and Harvey were saying this is great training for the Pamirs. And then to realise that on the first day you were like, oh no, the Pamirs is saying hold my beer, levelling up here, we're going to take it to the next adventure level. But you got through that and wow, it sounded like there was some real tough challenges. Well done to you and Harvey for bodging up a bit of a fix there with your rear pannier racks. And let's all say a big thanks to the virtues of zip ties. I had to laugh when you were talking about carrying 19 litres of water with you for this extra long section, only to find at the top of the summit that there was a river that you could have filtered water from. But, as you say, it's part of the adventure and it was also just showing exactly what you were capable of. I must say lastly, Rebecca, my heart is just full for you because I know from our conversations and your updates that you always find being in mountainous landscapes so energizing. So to know that you were there, fulfilling your dream of riding through the Pamirs, surrounded by some of the biggest mountains in the world, even though it must have been absolutely exhausting on those challenging roads, to know that you were just out there with Harvey for times alone, not meeting another soul, immersed purely in nature, I can only imagine that this is an experience of your life that you will never ever forget. And I'm so thankful that you shared it here with us. I cannot wait to hear your next updates and see where you are continuing on your adventure. You're currently in Kyrgyzstan. Where will you go to next? Listeners, it's time for me to give you a shout out to you, my absolute legends of superfans who have shown your love and appreciation for the work I'm putting together here on Seek Travel Ride and bought me a coffee. Today, I'm actually giving a shout out to a previous podcast guest who's done so, and that is Rika Schmee. Rika's from Germany and she took an incredible tour all around Europe, incorporating Morocco and then ending up in Turkey. And Rika simply said, I love you and the podcast, big love heart. Oh, Rika, I love you back. I cannot wait to ride bikes with you one day, and thanks so much for being a legend and supporting me on the show. Listeners, if you want to do the same and buy me some virtual coffees, simply head to buymeacoffee.com/Seek Travel Ride. You can buy me a coffee there, and more importantly, send me a message and let me know what is it that you love the most about the podcast. And until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.